Okay. So, hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever in the world you are. I'm Alethea, PATA's Youth Ambassador, and thank you very much for joining us today for PATA Youth Symposium 2021 under the theme Reflect, Reconnect, Revive alongside PATA Annual Summit. So today is our very first part of the PATA Youth Symposium. It is our keynote panel discussion, Tourism as a Positive Catalyst, where we pit dreams against reality and we want to find out how idealistic exactly are our dreams of building back better and how can we make it into a reality. So before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you everyone for joining us. And also, I just wanted to address the fact that I am in my living room. So welcome to my living room, everybody. Of course, this is because we are all affected by the global pandemic, and throughout last year, tourism students have experienced a huge upheaval. They have had to adapt to online learning platforms in isolation without the abilities to meet their schoolmates in person. These conditions, of course, hampered any progress of passion projects of their own and also stunted the growth of their personal networks. However, I do believe in silver linings, and the silver lining in all of this was that online communities grew in size and engagement, and an amazing community of international youths have rallied around the PATA Youth Program. So, of course, the PATA Youth Symposium is organized by PATA to continue supporting our youth community during this global pandemic. This is a continuation of our dedication to human capital development and to ensure the resiliency of our industry in the long run. We are extremely grateful to our PATA Youth sponsors and various co-hosts for their support for both the event and development of tomorrow's tourism leaders. So before we begin, on to the next slide, which is our housekeeping announcements. So please, of course, introduce yourself in the chat on Attendify platform. We want to get to know you and we want to know where you're from. So welcome to our international PATA Youth community. Tell us where you're from, share a little bit about yourself with us in the chat. We also regularly get these frequently asked questions during and after our webinars. So let me just tell you now that certificates of participation will be sent out next week after the entire Youth Symposium is over. And this webinar recording will be made available soon. So with that, I just wanted to tell you what we have lined up for us later today. So our agenda for today is really a panel discussion with our 4 guest speakers. We will have a Q&A session later today. So please get ready to ask any of your questions to our guest speakers in the Attendify chat. You can do this throughout the entire session and we will answer all your questions right at the end. And before we dive straight into the panel discussion itself, I do want to say thank you to our PATA Youth sponsors. These are our co-hosts who are supporting our event today. And without them, we would not have the successful event that we have today. So thank you very much to Asset HNC, to Daffodil International University, to Global Academy of Tourism and Hospitality Education, otherwise known as GATE, to PATA India Christ University Student Chapter, to RMIT Vietnam University, and Wong Soon University. So our co-hosts are really from all over the world, and we thank you very much for your support today. I also want to thank our PATA Youth sponsors. These are 5 organizations that have supported us, the youth, throughout 2020 during the pandemic, and they continue to support us today. So next slide, please. Our PATA Youth sponsors are iFree Group, Guam Visitors Bureau, Map2 Ventures, Sigmund, and Talent Basket. Thank you so much to our PATA Youth sponsors and our co-hosts for your support of the PATA Youth program. Now, finally, may I welcome to stage Datuk Musa. So our guest speaker today is Datuk Musa Yusof, who is currently holding a position as Deputy Director General, Promotion of Tourism Malaysia. He spearheaded multiple divisions at Tourism Malaysia with over 30 years of working experience in domestic as well as international marketing and promotion for Southeast Asia, Europe, Asia, and Africa. He's also presently a member of the Tourism Cabinet Committee, and he's the chairman of PATA Malaysia chapter. Dr. Musa, please turn on your camera and unmute yourself and say a few words to our audience.
Hi, thank you, Alicia, and the audience around the world, as well as members of the panelists of today. Hi, I'm Musa, currently in Putrajaya, Kuala Lumpur, right, sunny outside, and we are here today basically to discuss with the youth. And I'm also a chairman of PATA Malaysia chapter, and currently we have about 9, added one, the universities, colleges into our members. So therefore, I hope they can be into the youth chapter later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Musa, for joining us today. And next up, we have Jason Lusk. Jason is a regional pioneer in fostering cooperation between development agencies, large corporations, and technology innovators to accelerate social and environmental impact. He brought the Asian Development Bank into a partnership with PATA and Corporate Innovations Accelerator Plug and Play. This was to promote clean tech innovation in Asia's hospitality sector. Earlier, he created Mekong Innovative Startups in Tourism, also known as MIST, to incubate sustainable solutions across Cambodia, Laos, PDR, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. Jason leads Clickable Impact, an interdisciplinary consultancy committed to sustainable development goals. He is based in Hanoi. Jason, may I invite you to turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and if I could, I would like to sneakily insert one question early before our panel discussion. Could you possibly set the context for us? How does ADB play a role within the tourism industry?
Thank you, Alethea. So nice to be here. Before I answer your question, your sneaky question, I just want to say hello to Dr. Musa, to my fellow panelists, and all of the PATA youth joining the session today. So as Alethea mentioned, I am a consultant. I'm the managing partner of the Clickable Impact Consulting Group. But I've had the privilege of managing several tourism-related projects for the Asian Development Bank, or the ADB. So the question is, what role does a multilateral development bank like the ADB play within the tourism industry? It's an interesting question, and honestly, it's an evolving answer, because ADB, by the way, I should mention, in case you don't know what the ADB is, it's a multilateral facility, so an international organization with governments as members, just like, say, the World Bank, that provides finance primarily in the form of lending primarily to governments for infrastructure, but it also does some private sector lending for the same purpose. So that's ADB. And ADB hasn't really taken a systematic approach to tourism in the past, but that's changing now that COVID-19 has made clear the economic importance and impact of tourism. So what we're discovering is that there's really 3 ways that ADB can support the tourism industry and help the development of the industry. One of those is through infrastructure finance. ADB helps finance infrastructure projects, roads, ports, bridges that make destinations more accessible, that promote destination development, and also can make destinations more sustainable. But ADB also has other tools at its disposal. It can provide technical assistance, and it can also use concessional finance, which just means lending on preferred terms, to improve tourism policy and governance. And then I guess a third thing that's worth mentioning before I wrap up is within ADB, I'm currently working with a group called ADB Ventures, which is a VC fund, a venture capital fund within the ADB that makes investments in startups, and specifically makes investments in startups for impact against the Sustainable Development Goals. So Through ADB Ventures, we can now add to the list that we can help impactful technologies scale quickly through the tourism industry all over Asia. So thank you for the question, Alethea. I'll let you introduce the other panelists.
Thank you so much for that really quick overview of like how it kind of fits into the tourism industry. It's not something everyone knows. So thank you very much for that. So next up, we have our next guest speaker, Soo-Yin Lee from Discoverer. As the Managing Director of Discoverer, a global destination management company employing 400 people in Asia and Americas, Soo-Yin is passionate about the creation of sustainable livelihoods and the empowerment of local communities in emerging economies. Discoverer is committed to helping our B2B partners deliver inspired travel experiences, making a positive difference to the communities they operate in as part of their sustainability focus. A self-confessed growth junkie, Soo-Yin has built and transformed businesses in Asia over the past 15 years, developing strong leaders across different geographies and cultures. She's an advocate for gender equality and empowerment through education. So Soo-Yin, thank you very much for joining us today. Please unmute yourself and say a few words to our audience.
Thanks, Alethea. I'm delighted to be here. This is my first PATA Youth Symposium. So and I'm happy to be here today to talk about, a topic that's dear to my heart around responsible tourism and sustainability, and also to interact with what I see as a very important next generation of travel and tourism executives. So happy to be here and really looking forward to some good discussion.
So happy to have you join us. Thank you so much for being here with us. So last but very much not least, we have our final guest speaker, Pauline Yang. So Pauline is a recent graduate with an emphasis in hospitality and tourism from the School of Travel Industry Management at the University of Hawaii at Mauna. She currently serves as an AmeriCorps volunteer in service to America Vista, economic revitalization research analyst with the City and County of Honolulu. As a holistic thinker, she values cross-cultural cooperation to balance the social, cultural, environmental, and economical aspects of tourism. So being a PATA Youth member has given her many inclusive opportunities to meet diverse people, and she is excited to share some of perspective of what future leaders of tomorrow would like to see in the travel industry. So Pauline, could you please turn on your camera and unmute yourself? So honestly, this panel discussion was inspired by an email exchange between Pauline and I all the way back in January 2021. So Pauline, could you share with me a little bit and share with the audiences what was in that email discussion that really kickstarted this entire discussion that we had, as well as then inspired this panel discussion?
Thank you, Alethea, for the kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever in the world you are. It is such a pleasure to be here with everyone. And so, having been born and raised here on the island of Oahu, what I would like to share is what I have noticed within our society right now. And so over the past years, the opportunity for our island home to provide a thriving quality of life has not necessarily been able to give many people hope to enjoy what the place has to offer. And so here, tourism in a way has been mishandled, where striving for exponential visitor arrivals and growth did cause a system error, and challenges that came about mass tourism, to name a few, were ineffective regulation on accommodations in our neighborhoods, such as Airbnbs, failure to improve infrastructure in response to an increase of visitors, and poor destination management. So such situations have caused frustration among our local and indigenous individuals. And this is quite concerning, as intersecting disruptions of income and wealth inequality, human rights violation, and climate change has been exacerbated. So support has been disproportionately expanded, where leaving those in vulnerable and marginalized communities behind. So in terms of the time we are living in right now, COVID-19 is definitely here to stay, and we do need to adapt and learn how to coexist with it for extended amounts of time. And here in Hawaii, responsible and regenerative tourism is a model we are looking at for holistic insights on how we may transform back better. And so on a positive note, there are many ways we may champion change. And as a youth, how we may move forward is to invest in a bottom-up approach where we implement the triple bottom line. So tourism, like with this whole webinar being tourism as a positive catalyst, tourism definitely can be used as a medium or a platform where residents' well-being are prioritized first to then preserve our natural resources, culture, and land. And in this way too, this will build not only trust, but advance with community-based values to position Hawaii towards a more prosperous and resilient future. And with that, bringing in stakeholders from various sectors like government, nonprofit, private, and the community at large will definitely foster a diverse amount of ideas and exchange that will definitely contribute towards a successful collaboration and transform livelihoods of our people. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for kind of laying it out for us, the problems that you guys have seen and how you're hoping that a much more bottom-up approach will push the industry in a different direction for your local communities there in Hawaii. So, okay. Let's dive straight into the panel discussion. Now that we have introduced everyone, could I get everyone to come back to the stage, to the virtual stage, turn on your cameras, feel free to unmute yourself, and let's really get started. So I really want to just set the context for our audience. When COVID-19 happened, many of us saw it as an opportunity to really build back better. And now that we are almost 1 year into the global pandemic, there has been a lot of conversation, but I personally feel like I can't see much action. Maybe I'm blind, but there is a chance that the industry might bounce backwards into the old ways of business, therefore repeating the mistakes that we were already committing pre-COVID-19. So as a youth, and as Pauline has said, of course we dream of a very bright future even during these difficult times. And today's panel discussion is about asking our guest experts, what must we do to ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past? How realistic are our dreams to rebuild the industry and build it back better in a more sustainable and responsible way? How realistic are those dreams? So to kickstart the discussion, I wanted to ask Su Yin first. As someone who is very much part of the industry, you are leading the industry, you're a leader in the industry. What obstacles from your point of view stand in the way of us building back better?
Thanks, Alethea. I think firstly, the pandemic really has crippled the travel and tourism industry. And so those who have managed to survive or have been fortunate to have survived have scraped through by saving every cent, every dollar. So sadly, I think many of them won't have much cash to restart their business. So as the industry sort of recovers, I think a lot of operators will do whatever it takes to generate revenue, which may mean even further cost cuts to be able to offer the necessary discounts to win customers back. So I think we will see a lot of very competitive behavior. And as a result, I think sustainable practices may not be top of mind for many of the operators who are just trying to survive. Secondly, I think we've also lost a lot of promising young talent over the past 12 months to other sectors that have promised, obviously more stable careers, better income and longevity in their roles. So as a result, this talent pool that is really required to help transform the industry, bring new ideas to the table, to build a more sustainable future, has potentially been lost to our sector. So we may not get this talent back, which is why, symposiums such as this are so important to raise awareness and inspire, I guess, everyone on this call to stay in the industry and help make some positive changes.
Okay, great. So loss of talent is one challenge that you foresee in the future. I do know that many tourism students, yes, they have to pivot away simply because they need a job, they need find they need to find a way to survive. But they're also, a lot of them are still eager to communicate with our tourism leaders and look for a way to come back. Maybe 2 years in the future when the tourism industry has regained its footing and is starting to hire again. So there's definitely hope there. It's just that I think definitely youth symposiums like this, leaders like yourself need to continue to communicate the potential of a career in tourism with our youths. So the other thing that you mentioned is that sustainability is not top of mind for those who are trying to survive and earn back profits. Do you have anything that you would like to kind of share with maybe other industry leaders who would be in that position? Because even before COVID, for you, Discoverer was a leader in sustainability. For you guys, it was a way of life. So what would you say to other industry leaders out there who are putting sustainability aside?
Look, and it's a tough one because it depends on your own financial situation and what I would say is affordability. So I think for us, it's always been, even prior to COVID, it's always been a massive education process with our partners, our customers, to help them. And we're very thankful that a lot of our partners have been very open and very progressive around adopting sustainability measures. For example, reducing single plastic use by having refillable bottles, removing wet tissues that are in, plastic wrappers from their programs. But, all of this it requires an investment both on our part and on our partners' part, because it doesn't come without some cost. And I think we have just really been, I guess, through a big education campaign, really promoting that and helping our partners see the benefits of their investment in the communities that we take their travelers to. So I think it's necessary. I mean, I think we've seen, some of the really terrible effects of over tourism and environmental impact from that. So there isn't an easy answer to that, but I think for all of us, I think it's those who survive in the industry, we do have a responsibility to make sure that it's here for generations to come. So it's worth it. And I think we'll be surprised at how many customers then who survive this pandemic are actually willing to invest and make those changes. Yeah.
Okay, so Jason, I see you nodding your head a lot. So let's pivot to you. For someone who is investing in the industry, what obstacles from your point of view stand in the way of us building back better?
That's an interesting question. I fear with my answer, I'm going to simultaneously upset both Suyin and Dr. Musa. So I invite the audience, rather than watching me, watch the color come to their faces as I speak. This is the best part of being a consultant. I get to throw bombs. So look, I think at first we need to sort of define what it means to build back better. We all want desirable, well-managed, growing bucket list destinations that provide a lot of opportunity for the industry. But we also want to balance that with preserving and enhancing the natural environment, cultural sites, public spaces, and other tourism assets, balancing tourism and community life so that they can coexist side by side, improving wages, protecting workers, encouraging greater participation in the formal economy, supporting vulnerable populations, especially minorities, women, children. And ideally, we do all this while paying for the development of destinations through tourism revenues without imposing hidden costs on local communities. That's hard to do. That wasn't happening in 2019 and the before times. It's certainly not happening now. And unfortunately, I think it's unlikely to happen. And this is a failure of governance, right? The tourism industry, like any industry, This is the part where you should be watching Suyin and especially Dr. Musa. They need to be regulated for the public good. In fairness, this is harder to do in tourism than other industries because it's really an industry of sub-industries. There's no clear vertical supply chain. But just because it's difficult to govern and regulate tourism doesn't mean it doesn't need to be done. What was always wrong was that the industry, was that most destinations don't have any coherent regulatory oversight over the tourism value chain. What's going to prevent them from building back better now? Most destinations don't have coherent oversight over the tourism value chain. So here's what needs to happen. We need to consolidate the governance and regulation of destinations and make that governance accountable to the communities that are impacted by tourism. Much easier said than done, but that if we really want to build back better, that's what needs to happen. Then we need to give destination managers access to good data and the ability to act on it. We need to empower them to protect tourism assets. We need to give them control over volumes of visitors by influencing ports of entry and through user fees and on and on and on. But to most people in the tourism industry, this is crazy talk. This is absolute insanity. I'm suggesting that we turn the way that tourism economies have developed over the last 30 years or more upside down, putting a leash on the sort of laissez-faire, Wild West forces that have allowed for double-digit growth in tourism economies across much of Asia, especially Southeast Asia in recent years. But what happens if we don't do that? If we don't seriously address governance? Well, increasingly, it looks like we won't, first of all. There was kind of a narrow path forward at the beginning of this pandemic, a chance to rethink tourism, but that path is disappearing a little bit every day as we get closer to immunization and people traveling again. And what happens when it's gone? Well, best case scenario, destinations in our region evolve in the direction of like a Dubrovnik, Croatia, right? Like a living museums that are overcrowded with visitors, expensive to the point where people can't really afford to live there, but hey, at least visitors still want to come and the industry can make money off of that. Worst case scenario, beautiful places become dusty, they become ugly with overdevelopment. Traditional ways of life get corrupted by economic opportunity and too much contact too early with the outside world. And sooner or later, no one wants to come. So I fear that we're headed in one direction or the other. I honestly, I'm not that hopeful that we're going to fundamentally address the problems and build back better. There are things we can do, but we're addressing the symptoms and not the disease.
So I think suggesting a complete system overhaul, that's something that is really difficult to achieve, but you also spoke about trying to find that balance, and that balance is something that we've been trying to find even pre-COVID times, not just when COVID happened. And that kind of very happily leads us to our question for Datuk Musa, who is representing Tourism Malaysia. So Datuk Musa, what do you have to say in response to Jason's point that maybe tourism needs to be regulated for the public good? I think we have been trying to find that balance, but what makes it's easier said than done, right? So what makes it difficult? What are the obstacles and challenges from your point of view as someone who is leading this industry that really stand in the way of us building back better?
Thank you, Alicia. The way I look at it, and even when Suyin was saying about the loss of talent, these are the, when COVID came in, I think that affects some of these industries, especially in tourism. And as per what Jason was saying, I think, of course, it needs to be regulated. And I think being a country like Malaysia, we have regulations actually imposed even before COVID when it comes to, for example, licensing, sustainability, on environment and the rest. And I think with COVID, I think it augurs well with the PATA PAS summit this year, reflect, reconnect, as well as to revive. And I think we have to reflect what went wrong and then reconnect what are the things that we need to do and plan it. So on our side, actually, when come, I can state it in terms of Malaysia, because we have the federal government. I'm representing the Federal Tourism Board, and we have also state government having so-called either their state tourism bodies, as well as the local council that within the state government purview. So when the head of COVID, what we have done is that we sat down together because we need to trigger down the communication directly from federal all the way to the local authorities. Because when it comes to regulator, the tourism board not be regulated, not even the Ministry of Tourism when it comes to regulation. So these are the things that we have to get the state government as well as the local council to come in. However, when it comes to the federal government in terms of licensing of tour operator, licensing of tourist guide, that's under us. But marketing the rest of the tourism products under us. So this is what we're doing. And as you can see, what happened in case of Malaysia due to COVID, we are back to, if you look into the arrival figures, we are back to 1998. 22 years ago, then we're back into that for 2020 figure that we have. This is where then we recollect back among us when we sit down among the tourism industry. This is where when our arrival into Malaysia was only about 4.3 million in 1998. Then we started launch something that everybody is in the tips of people's mouth. Malaysia to Asia was coined in 1999 for the rest of the world, and holidaying in Malaysia for domestic tourism. As you can see, I can share with you in terms of numbers. 2019, you can see we received about 26.1 million tourists arrival international. Last year, we received only about 4.3 million. There was a drop of 83%. I think it's all the way. We're talking about Asia Pacific, 84%. ASEAN, more or less about 80+%. I think these are the things that you can look into. And being the tourism industry, we are the first, the industry, the first hit by COVID-19. And you can see we are going to be the last to recover. So, however, the government of Malaysia, I think what Jason was saying was correct, that we have to look into regulating it. What we have done, we get all the private sector together with us. And we say down, again, we need data, like Jason was saying, data. We get all the data, number of tour coaches, number of tourist guides, number of tour companies that in trouble. And then this is where then we put out the whatever necessary paper directly to the Prime Minister. And by doing so, then the latest one, I think there was about 5 initiatives being developed. As you can see, when we come up with the last one, that's dedicated specifically for the tourism industry. The one that you can see, for example, some of the tourism tax and services being extended, and then some of the support, that's one-off support being given to all the tour companies and even to tourist guides, even to the bus drivers, and because this affects their livelihood. And what we can see is that when we come into there's some obstacle and challenges. We look at the obstacle, is basically is to get them, because COVID is something different. We have a data that we showed that during SARS, it wasn't this bad. But COVID, it is, I think, 100 times more worse than SARS. And after 1 year, we can also see that, we need to boost up people's confidence, not only international, but within the country itself, because even domestic tourism, for example, people to cross borders. And as you can see, it's already past 1 year, 1 month. Most of industries, or we talk about tourism industry, they use up their savings already. These are we're talking about, the financial. To what extent they can extend it. That's why we launched last 2 months, the support for them. And currently, I think all over destination, we are looking into domestic tourism to bolster the traffic. And we have 6 strategic plans that we put in. Of course, now Malaysia, the border is still closed, and we need to move forward. In terms of pushback from the stakeholders, we have to take a look on some destination, for example, in Malaysia. If you look at Langkawi, for example, 70% in Langkawi, the island north of Malaysia, on tourism. And these are the things that the single economy contribution when it comes to tourism. And we need to get the local community readiness in adapting to the new policy. And of course, we need to support them. And hopefully, this will, with the plan that we put forward to the state government and the rest, we are moving ahead on that. I think that perhaps my answer for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that detailed answer. I think I want to kind of give Pauline a chance to ask any of her follow-up questions to any of our guest speakers, because you guys have presented like very different points of views. And I think it just helps us understand the overall picture a little bit better, and helps us understand how complex actually this situation is, because everyone who is involved in tourism as a different stakeholder, right, has a different point of view. So Pauline, do you have any follow-up questions for our guest speakers?
I think just one where destinations that are very dependent on tourism and they start for, actually they're phasing out of domestic tourism. How does one destination market to those that are within there when maybe even the local residents might not have as much of a higher spending power?
Who does that question go to?
That question goes to Dr. Musa. Thank you.
Pauline, can you repeat it again? Sorry, the line wasn't that good. Yeah.
Okay, totally fine. So my question was that how does one's destination market to perhaps the local residents if the actual destination is trying to revive towards domestic tourism, but then perhaps the local residents doesn't have too much of a higher spending power as of right now due to COVID?
Let me give you some data when it comes to Malaysia. You can hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. When it comes to, you see, 15% of Malaysia's GDP is on tourism. About 15%. And 23.3%, there's a direct employment. 23.6%, there's direct employment on tourism when it comes to Malaysia. And in terms of numbers, about 3.6 million Malaysian directly in terms of employed under the tourism. So these are the things that we have to, we have coined that word even before COVID in Malaysia, think tourism, act tourism. But recently, I think we had this PATA conference. I think there was a former Minister of Tourism of, I think, Seychelles did mention, now we have to sleep tourism, eat tourism, dream tourism, not only act and think. So these are the things that I think in Malaysia, tourism, we managed to, we started fairly late. It was 1990. Some of our neighboring countries started maybe 200-300 years ago. But the thing is that now people are already talking about tourism, and they know the benefit of tourism bringing to the local. So therefore, what we have done, basically to get the local community, because they know there's a spillover effect directly to them. So these are the things when it comes to the businesses, they can see there's tourism that bring, like I said, for instance, just now, the Langkawi, 70% relying on tourism. There's another state, for example, in Malaysia called Malacca, and heavily rely on tourism. So these are the things that not only the community, they know that the impact of tourism, but what we do now is to get people to travel within Malaysia is put forward the domestic tourism. As you can see, UNWTO also did mention about domestic tourism. And I can share you with the data because in 1990, when we pushed Malaysia to Asia for the international into Malaysia, we also pushed this tagline or the brand, Cuti Malaysia or holiday in Malaysia to the rest of Malaysia to travel within Malaysia. And we managed to convince the government, in a way, to have only 5 days working day. The 2 weekend is free to travel within Malaysia. And as you can see, the latest data being given, it was 2019 data when it comes to domestic tourism. You can see the domestic tourism brought in more income as compared to international tourism. So these are the things that we are looking at, and we managed to convince to get, for example, domestic MICE, meeting, incentive, convention, and exhibition, to travel within Malaysia. And in a way that people can see it now, because if you're staying in a hotel, those shops supplying vegetable, newspaper, whatever thing to the hotels, will also benefit, and even the surrounding area. So we did a strong campaign digitally currently, as well as using the traditional media, getting people to travel. Of course, there are some restrictions in terms of cross-state borders, but within the state, sometimes we tell them, hey, for example, let's move within Selangor, that one state in Selangor, for example. Let's move within the state of Malacca, because they cannot cross to the other state. So these are the things that we trigger that. We are not just keeping quiet, but we are pushing it domestically, that people need to travel within Malaysia. Okay, Pauline, I think that helped to answer your question, I think.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Musa.
Thank you, Pauline.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the other questions that we have in our panel discussion. So Pauline, I know we talked about the industry's need for a new definition of success, and we talked about this very briefly. And I know you have some questions on metrics, like what are the new metrics that we should be using? And I know you want to ask that to our guest speaker, so I'm going to hand over the mic to you. In the meantime, to our audience on Attendify, if you have any questions, please start putting them into the Attendify chat, and we will try to get to them during our Q&A right at the end. So Pauline, take it away.
Thank you, Alethea. So the very first question would go towards Suyin. And the question is, if we want to redefine what success means to tourism, what other metrics should we consider measuring other than the bottom line? From Discova's point of view, you are the leaders in sustainability and working with local communities way before the pandemic. So what metrics were you all using to measure success?
Thanks, Pauline. I think we're not terribly sophisticated from that perspective. We are a private enterprise, not an NGO, but under our different pillars of sustainability, we have many projects. So we've just created success metrics for those projects. For example, around single-use plastic reduction. So we measure the number of bottles that we would have not used by using refillable bottles. So, in 2019, I think we took out about 265,000 bottles, or we reduced the usage by that, which is about 15 tons of plastic. Other things that we do would be around some of our social enterprises. So measuring the number of visitors that go on our local life tours, the amount of revenue that goes directly back to these communities, the number of jobs that were created as a result of creating new enterprises that support the local communities. So there's lots and lots of different ways that we have of simply just measuring the outcomes from our initiatives. I hope that answers that question.
Yes, thank you so much, Suyin. And so the second question, let's see, we'll go to Jason. And so the question is, which sector within the tourism industry should we be targeting our efforts to achieve the biggest positive impact? So what kinds of ROs do you look at, which you considered successful investment, and how does ADB Ventures decide what to invest in?
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. Interesting question. I think that I can answer it in two ways. From the perspective of Asian Development Bank as a broad institution, and then from the perspective of ADB Ventures, which is the VC investor within ADB. For Asian Development Bank, I think this is all about infrastructure, right? There is plenty of need and scope to invest in better infrastructure, more efficient infrastructure to support the development of and the sustainability of destinations. Infrastructure that makes destinations accessible, infrastructure that draws tourists away from overcrowded destinations towards secondary destinations, infrastructure that improves waste management and beautifies destinations. All that is extremely important. I think that there was strong need for that before the pandemic, and the need remains. For ADB Ventures as a venture capital investor under the ADB, a venture capital investor that is investing for sustainable development impact in the tourism industry, as well as really across the board in the Asia Pacific. Where we see the sweet spot is with hospitality. Hospitality is the one sub-industry within the tourism industry where there are clear opportunities to invest in, particularly in technologies and new business models for impact. Technologies like smart site selection, smart construction, sustainable building materials, building information management and building energy management, water conservation, improving indoor air quality, kitchens, so avoiding food waste and handling food waste, avoiding plastics in both the hotels as a whole and in commercial kitchens. So lots of opportunities there. And actually ADB Ventures was engaged with PATA on a joint program called Travel Lab Asia, where we were working with big hospitality corporates across the region, including Minor International out of Thailand, Jetwing out of Sri Lanka, and Hilton Hotels globally, to look for these win-wins, these technologies that can be implemented in hotels and resorts at scale, contributing to the traditional bottom lines of the hotels by saving them cost, while at the same time contributing to their triple bottom line or their sustainable outcomes. But I mean, it's important, I think, whenever you sort of veer into this territory of thinking like a VC, those kinds of technologies and scaling those kinds of technologies requires a very different way of thinking. This is not sort of top-down government decision-making. You can't sort of set a policy and expect everybody to fall in line. You do need to look for those win-wins, the overlap between the traditional bottom line and sustainable development or corporate social responsibility. So, you know, we're looking, ADB Ventures is looking to make a commercial return on these investments. We're also trying to show other investors that it's possible to make money off of these. So what are we looking for? We're looking for investments for startup companies, so innovative technology companies, where if we make an investment in that company, we're going to see a return of 100x. Our investment is going to grow by 100 times. So this, you know, these companies need to be really unique and revolutionary. They need to deliver significantly better results than the existing alternatives already on the market. So it can't just be an incremental change, it needs to be a radical change. Companies need to have amazing management and a big enough market. And honestly, we're only really looking to invest in technologies that already have some traction. So maybe it's an Indonesian startup that's gotten some great traction in Bali. How can we take that company and help them expand into Malaysia and Vietnam and further afield in Asia Pacific? So I hope that answers your question, but that's how we're looking at the opportunities.
Thank you so much, Jason. And so I think the other question would be for Dr. Musa. And so what are the current metrics that governments use currently right now? And what are some metrics that government is considering to measure in the near future?
Okay, Pauline, currently what the Malaysian Tourism Board is doing is basically we are calculating both domestic and the international tourist arrival as to gauge on the not only in terms of expenditures, We also go in depth into the per capita expenditure, their average length of stay, and also we even calculate the main components of the expenditures as well, as their preference. And we have what we call it each market's distinct figure. What are the USPs or the unique selling proposition that we can put forward? In the future, we will be focusing on because like I said earlier, we have been pushed back to 1998. And again, I said, with this pandemic, there's a blessing in disguise. This is time for us to rethink and what are the things that we need to do. So even the industry, way back, the earlier part, in the year 2020, when COVID came in, before become a pandemic even, they even sat down the Malaysian Tourism Council and the Malaysian Productivity Center, because they agreed among the private sectors that they need to reset tourism. There are 5 things that they look into. They need to find the data. Just now, I think Jason was talking about the data, the research, the target market, and they even thinking about the remodeling of the marketing promotion. Currently, for example, physical fair and exhibition, physical roadshow. Now we are into virtual even now. And also there's a reinvent new product, mass tourism versus niche or FITs or GITs to FITs. So these are the things that we've been looking at. And if you look into the market as well, they are changing now into more FITs, not so much of group. So they are, I was told, but some of the private sector, the tour operators even, start to remodeling even their coaches with reduced seat, with the more amenities, things, in order to get into this traffic once the borders open up. And of course, we need to recalibrate the industry and get everybody together. Just now, like I said, the federal, the state government, and the local authorities, as the regulators, we need to bring them together and sit down and look into this. And again, that's what Jason was saying. We have to take a ride on technology, digitalization, and so forth. So back onto the details that we're looking at, the metrics, we're going into high yield tourism in terms of market that we're coming in. Versus, of course, quantity is still there, but we are looking into high yield. And of course, we are looking at the convention sector, or MICE, Incentive Convention Exhibition, as once the borders start opening up. Again, we are going into, most of the Malaysian operators, tour agencies, they are still majority in traditional format. So we need to get them into online, become an OTA, doing in traditional as well the digital one, and also to get into the platform and manage to sell even further and directly. And we need to continue communicating to the rest of the world. And this is the thing. And the best thing that we have done is that we even launched our National Tourism Policy 2020-2030 during this time with the adaptation on the pandemic, as well as the Eco-Tourism Plan. This is another thing that we already put forward, the Eco-Tourism Plan, ETP, for Malaysia. And hopefully we can get the new traffic coming in with the new set of people, and we are Malaysian ready for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Musa. And so in conclusion, we would like to also ask everyone on the panel if anyone has words of advice for the youth who want to make a difference with their careers in the tourism industry. And
sorry, before we go to that question, let's keep that question for right at the end to end this entire session on a super high note. But before we go to that question, let's go to our Q&As, because we have some really good questions coming in from Attendify, and I want to get to them now, and we have limited time. So we have one question from Hafiz Hanifa from the University Technology Mara, Malaysia. And this question has a few likes on Attendify as well. So that means that several Attendify attendees have said that they want to ask this question. So the question is, while tourism and conservation can have a symbiotic relationship, that relationship is far from guaranteed. evidenced from various negative impacts of unsustainable tourism development. How could restarting tourism, this campaign, be a catalyst in reforming government deployment policy post-COVID? So I'm sorry, Dr. Musa, I think this is a question again for you. Would you like to tackle it? And then, of course, after that, Jason and Suyin, if you guys have anything else to add to Dr. Musa's answer, please feel free to join in.
Thank you for the question from Mr. Hafiz, I think, on tourism and conservation. For us, I think it augurs well with what I mentioned just now. We launched our national tourism policy. It was done about 1.5 years ago, and we did in time from time we adjust it to make sure that it covers the latest whatever development, and of course conservation is part of it. And we also launched the ecotourism plan because we had one and expired, and we launched a new one. Therefore, this again that I said when it comes to you see. We always have this term that we use in Malaysia: tourism, preserve, conserve the mother natures. So we need to protect this because again, like I said, being as a tourism board, we do not own the product. We only market the product, and the product, whether it's individual, it can be private. But the things that, again, like what Jason was saying earlier, to regulate it. So you see, in case of Malaysia, what we have done is, again, I said, the federal, the state government, and the local authority, we get together with different government agencies to preserve. For example, we have a lot of areas like islands underneath the sea, whatever above the hills, the mountains, and the rest, that we gazette as a national park. Once we gazette it national park, so there'll be a regulatory body that supervise it and make sure everything, and we can use it as a tourism attraction after that. And these are the things that we've been doing, and these are policies that we put in place, and hopefully, and I think it will make sure that the destination remain as it is. One of the, for example, I think there's also a commitment from the private sector that we need to do so. I gave, for an example, the island of Sipadan in Malaysia. In 2005, there was several resorts. I think about 5 resorts earlier in Sipadan, but it comes to the resort themselves realized, by having our resort here at the island, it in a way jeopardized the marine biodiversity. So what they did, they together demolished their resort and clear it, and because of that. And then they put some what we call regulated. There can be only certain numbers of people can be in the area. So when they demolish the resort, they let the island stay still in order to get everything back. It is not totally demolished, but there are some that the finding that you can see. So what they have done is that they closed and relocated it to a nearby island where there's a establishment, and Sipadan Island Park was gazetted way back in 2009. And you can see now, we limit number, only 120 people can be there per day.
That is an amazing example, I think, of the private sector stepping up.
Yeah.
Right? So I wanted to kind of pivot to Suyin and ask her because she's very much part of the private sector, and she's the voice of the private sector in this panel discussion. What response would you have to Dr. Musa's example and also answer to this question about rebuilding back tourism as a catalyst to reform government development and policy?
Yeah, look, I must admit, I do agree with Jason that governance is important because, in the industry, there is a lot of competition. So, as I say, you're often as bad or as dumb as your dumbest competitor because you're forced to go into competition with often, competitors don't have the best practices. So I do agree that some governance, I think is important. Secondly, I think it's really important to bring the right people to the table to have these discussions. So policymakers don't just go off and make policies without consultation with private enterprise, without experts, like Jason and his company. So I think it's really important to have productive dialogue with the relevant stakeholders at the table, because otherwise you'll have people going off on different tangents. So I'm all for governance, but has to be a collaborative process, and I think that is critical in terms of the stakeholders being able to support that moving forward.
Thank you so much for that answer, for also bringing in the need for public-private conversation. That's really important. That's something that Pauline and I wanted to talk about, but we have no time to talk about today. So Jason, could you please let us know, what do you think about this moment in tourism, restarting tourism as a catalyst in reforming government development policy?
Yeah, look, you'll hear me talk a lot in terms of assets, and actually, before I do that, I just want to thank you, Suyin, and Dr. Musa for your very supportive comments on this, and I want to say particularly Dr. Musa. I think Malaysia has been a leader in governance across the region, and the way that the tourism sector has developed in Malaysia can be a model for the rest of our region. I congratulate you on that. But yeah, I talk in terms of assets for a very simple reason. Not everybody gets behind the idea of preserving the environment and natural resources. Not everybody gets behind the idea of protecting communities, depending on where you stand within the industry. In fact, people can be rather callous towards that. Even government decision makers can be rather callous towards that. I live not in Malaysia, I live in Vietnam. Euromonitor International recently came out with a sustainable destination index for 2021. And in that index, Vietnam ranked, I believe, third from last in its commitment to sustainable destination development. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how can you get people who don't seem to care about sustainability to care about sustainability. And I keep coming back to this word asset. Your natural environment, your communities and cultures, these are assets. These are the reasons why tourists want to visit a destination. And just like if you have $1 million as an asset, you can spend that $1 million and buy houses and cars and all sorts of things, or you can put that $1 million in a bank and get your 3%, your $30,000 every year forever. I think it's helpful to think of tourism assets in the same way that you think of that $1 million. How can we put those tourism assets in the proverbial bank so that tourists don't just enjoy them today, but can continue to enjoy them in perpetuity, so that the tourism industry doesn't just make money off of it today or for 5 years or for 20 years, but continues to make money off of those assets in perpetuity. I think that's the way that we need to change the conversation around tourism. I think that some countries like Malaysia get it. Others will take a little more persuading, but that's the right way to reframe.
Thank you so much for that answer. So unfortunately, that is all of the time we have today for this panel discussion. This panel discussion has been so exciting. The fact that we have voices representing government, representing financials, and representing the industry as well as the youth on the same stage to be able to talk freely about what are our challenges, what are our dreams, and what we hope to do in the future, as well as everything that we've already done in the past. I think just having this space is such an important space for us to learn from each other, and also from the youth to learn from the industry experts. So thank you so much, Dr. Musa, Jason, and Suyin, and Pauline for coming on board with me on this really exciting panel discussion. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you guys speak on these really complex issues, and just to help us as our audience understand that it's not as easy as we hope it would be to just simply say, okay, we're going to build back better. There are all these challenges, there are all these different things and stakeholders that we need to talk to and we need to be able to adjust for. So I think, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to ask my colleague to throw up our slides. And I have 1 minute to wrap up before the platform cuts me off. But upcoming next, we have an amazing forum with amazing speakers arranged by my Director of Communications, Paul. We have some amazing speakers for these sessions. I know the World Bank, the World Economic Forum are speaking, as well as the CEOs of Agoda, TripAdvisor, the presidents of Emirates Airlines. All these amazing people are coming up next in our PAS forum that's happening later. And I would like to give a shout out to Ras Al Khaimah, who is our platinum sponsor for PATA Annual Summit 2021, as well as the Global Tourism Economic Forum, who is our gold sponsor. Thanks to their support, we've been able to make this event free for all to attend. And for the Youth Symposium itself that runs alongside PAS, tomorrow at 10 a.m. we have part 3 of the Youth Symposium happening. It is an SDG workshop that will help you scale up your impact. It is co-organized by Capilano Student Chapter and sponsored by Sigmund. So we hope to see all of you there at our part 3 SDG workshop, Scaling Up Your Impact, happening tomorrow at 10 a.m. GMT +7. And upcoming, we have an opportunity for all PATA youths, which is the PATA IGLTA Foundation Building Bridges Fellowship. This is a fellowship or sponsorship where we sponsor one youth to travel to attend the IGLTA Annual Global Convention. And this is to support the next generation of LGBTQ+ travel professionals and allies. The deadline to apply is 15 June 2021. And to never miss out an opportunity like our mentorship session that's happening next, or the PATA IGLTA Fellowship, please make sure you join our international community and become a member of PATA Youth. So I want to thank our PATA Youth sponsors, 5 organizations who have supported us. They are iFree, Guam Visitors Bureau, Map2 Venture, Sigmund, and Talent Basket. These guys are amazing. They have been sponsoring us and supporting us throughout the pandemic, and they continue to support us today. As well as we couldn't have done it without our co-hosts, Asset HNC, Daffodil International University, Global Academy of Tourism and Hospitality Education Chapter, RMIT Vietnam University, and Wong Sun University. So thank you so much to our guest speakers who have given us such invaluable insight to the very complex issue we have today. Thank you so much to our youth sponsors, our co-hosts, to our attendees who attended. I think at one point we had 400 people watching us live on Attendify, and that is really amazing to know that 1 hour of your time has been invested in 400 lives out there who now have a better idea of how complex the situation is. Thank you so much, guys. Sorry.
Thanks, Alethea.
Thank you.
So yes, that is all the time we have for today, and I will see you at our next session. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.